We'll be creating a new Adobe property. We'll first go into the organization under which we wish to create the property and hit the Add New Property button. The property name can be anything we choose, and for the platform, we'll choose Adobe Launch Adobe Analytics. Here we have the option of choosing a legacy implementation type, which is the Adobe Analytics that you are likely used to, or a modern implementation type whose output will be XDM that goes to the Adobe Edge and can then be routed to other systems. In this case, we'll leave the legacy type selected. We also have the custom components box, which allows this property to inherit records from its parent agency and organization. By default, these are enabled, and generally we want to keep these enabled so that we have access to records that are intended to be shared with all properties under this organization and agency. We'll hit next, and we'll get a warning that we'll be charged for this property. This isn't the case for sandbox properties or properties that you've already agreed to, but if you are adding more properties than originally intended, there is a fee associated. We'll hit continue. And we're prompted to choose our data layer name. In this case, the default name for our event-driven data layer is app event data. And we can change this to anything that we choose, but this is where all of our events will fire if we look in the console. We also have the option to connect to our GitHub account. If I click on this, I'll be prompted to sign into GitHub, and this will allow me to publish my specifications to GitHub from Apollo. I'll hit next. And then I'll be prompted to connect with my Adobe I/O credentials. If I click on this article, I'm able to see the help details on how to set up an Adobe I/O connection and the permissions that I'll need in order to do so. It's worth noting that this takes place in the account of the organization that you'll be working in. So if you're part of an agency doing work for a client, this would happen within the client's Adobe I/O instance. The project will be created within Adobe I/O, and you'll be creating a service account JWT connection with the appropriate APIs added from this article. Once that's been done, you'll enter a connection name. And then all of the information comes from the Adobe I/O service account JWT connection and can be copied directly out of Adobe I/O in that particular order. So I'm copying all of the necessary details over from Adobe I/O. And then finally, I need my private key. And the private key is downloaded when I first choose the project, and it is available for import. So once I find my private key file, I'll want to make sure that I open that in a plain text editor. And then I am able to import that file and bring it in. And I noticed that this is testing for the proper format for my private key. So it typically ends with end private key. And if I put anything in that is not correct, then I will receive an error. The private key file is typically called private.key, and I'll paste the entire contents in and hit test. And I'll either get a notice that I'm unable to authenticate with Adobe I/O or that my authentication is successful. If I'm able to successfully connect, I'll get a message that I successfully connected, and I'll hit next. I'm prompted to enter my tracking server and SSL tracking server. These will be the same settings that I'd input into Adobe Launch. And if you're unaware of these settings, work with the Adobe Launch administrator for the organization that you're configuring. You're also able to select the development, staging, and production report suites that you'd like to configure as part of this Apollo project. So you'd make the appropriate selections there. And finally, we're prompted as to whether we want to map our existing implementation. And this means that we want to import the existing variable configuration that's been set up in Adobe Analytics and map that into Apollo. If we are starting from scratch or doing a primarily net new implementation, then we would not want to map the existing implementation. But if we're trying to get some parity with something that already exists, then we would hit yes. So I'll make my selection here, and I'll be prompted if I hit no that I won't be able to go back to this again on this property. So in this case, I'll hit continue, and I'm taken to the design screen within the new property that I just created.